What's happening, everybody? How's it going? Let's roll into today's topic. And what we're going to be talking about here today is property valuation and financial analysis. We're going to be putting on our appraiser's hats. And today's topic is like super important, not only for your state exam, but also for real life real estate, because as real estate agents, we are always guessing property values. We're determining list price. We're advising our clients on how much they should offer and taking an educated guess on what properties are worth. Today's topic is going to go over appraisals. We're going to go over different types of appraisal reports. We're going to be talking about the process itself and different methods on how to determine prices for certain types of properties. We're also going to be talking about investing as well too, because that's a completely different type of analysis and process and breakdown. The topic that we are covering here today is about 14% of your final state exam, which is about 21 questions. So make sure we are adding notes, pause it, speed up this video. You guys make sure you can download the handout as well too, which is at the top right. If you hover your mouse over the top right, you'll be able to download today's handout. So let's jump into today's topic. And let's start first with the appraisals. We're going to talk about the essential elements of value. We're going to talk about why appraisals are needed, and we're going to talk about licenses and certifications. So let me start off with a story real quick. So I got this property here, 8521 Kendor in Buena Park, and I was the listing agent for this transaction. I took the listing. This was in 2020, and went through the house. I did my analysis. I pulled my comps and had a discussion with the seller, and we came up with a list price. The list price that we chose, we felt was at market. We felt that we would get multiple offers for this property as well too. We had, the house itself was nice, had good pictures, had a pool, had good bones to it, and showed pretty well. It wasn't like super updated, but it was updated enough, right? So we hit the market. I did my marketing. We hit the market at $849,900. We did receive multiple offers that first weekend. We had like 5 offers. They weren't crazy over asking, but we ended up accepting an offer for $850,000. So we opened escrow. The buyer, started their loan. They did their inspections. They ordered an appraisal, and our appraiser came to the property. The appraiser took pictures, did measurements. I met the appraiser. Super nice guy. And after the appraiser left, a couple days later, the appraiser generated a report. And the appraiser that came to the property said the property value was $790,000. My seller flipped. Even I was kind of like, bro, that doesn't really make sense. Why did you use these comps? We did not agree with the price. And my seller was very adamant. He's like, I'm not reducing this property a dime. Like, the appraiser basically had it out for us, is what he felt like. Even I thought too that it was a bit absurd, the comps that this one appraiser chose. So the buyer, of course, wanted a reduction of the price. The buyer said, the appraiser said it's worth $790,000. It's overpriced. And my seller said, we think it's worth $850. No thanks. If you want to cancel, cancel. So at the last moment, we're talking cancellation, and we told the buyers, if you don't want to buy it, don't buy it. At the last minute, the buyer said, hey, we can't do another appraisal, but we'll change our lenders and we'll start the process over and we'll do another appraisal. Because the buyers were still within their allotted time frame to do their inspections, appraisal, and loan, we allowed them the time. So the buyer got another lender, ordered another appraisal. They paid another $600 for an appraisal. Another appraiser came out to the property and did the appraisal again. Guess how much the second appraisal came in at? Take a wild guess. Well, the second appraisal came in at $850,000. How is that possible? How did two people in a span of 12 days, two licensed professionals, appraiser 1 and appraiser 2, had two completely different opinions? They used two completely different comps. And when I say comps, they used different properties to justify the value. But one appraisal came in at $790 and one came in at $750. Why does this happen? Well, who knows what really happened. One part of the story that I chose to leave out was the buyer was related to the buyer's agent, and the buyer's agent was related to the lender because that was his wife. So were they all in cahoots? Who really truly knows? I don't think they were. I think we just caught an appraiser on a bad day and he saw it one way and the other person saw it the other way. But what is an appraisal? And I highlight the word opinion is because an appraisal is just a professional opinion of an estimate as the monetary value of a particular property on a specified date by a licensed third-party disinterested appraisal. That's what it is. It is an opinion of a person who is a professional. And that is what an appraisal is. Quite often, I'll have a seller, prior to us listing a property, they'll say, Ben, should we get an appraisal done before we list the home? I'll always say no. And the reason I say this is because just because an appraiser says, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, your property is worth $700,000 doesn't mean that the market is going to agree with that. Doesn't mean it'll sell for that. If an appraiser says today that property is worth $700,000, but if you put it on the market and no buyers offer $700,000, guess what? It's not worth $700,000. Simple as that. And that is what an appraisal is, everybody. Just remember, it is an opinion of a licensed professional. We got two terminology here. We got to know market price and market value. So market price is what it is actually sold for in the market. And I throw a little example here. If the property is listed at $500,000, but you receive 15 offers and it closes for $550, guess what? The price is $550. The market price is $550 because that's what it actually sold for. Whereas the market value is an estimation. Call this the list price if you want. This is an estimation of what the property would be worth if it were put up for sale in the open market. This is you asking me, Ben, here's my address. What's the market value of my property? I'll do some comps, I'll pull some data, and I'll say, hey, your property is worth X amount of dollars. That's just the market value. If we were to put it on the market, sell it, closes, that's the market price. So small difference between the two. This one's a key element that you got to know for your real estate exam, and this is the 4 elements of essential value. I need you to remember the acronym DUST, D-U-S-T, which stands for demand, utility, scarcity, and transferability. And this here is how we're going to determine the value. I always say this. If there's an acronym involved, it's probably important for your exam. So remember this, D-U-S-T, and that's demand, utility, scarcity, and transferability. So let's go demand. Does anybody want the property? The question that you're asking here is demand. What is the demand like for the property? Does anybody want the property? Is it in a great location? Is there a desire and need to ability to purchase? That's the demand. We know supply and demand. Demand is what we're talking about here. Utility, does anyone use this property? The usefulness. We're talking about the floor plan. We're talking about the bedroom and bath count, the utility. We know there's a demand. That's going to help on value. Now, is this a 3-bedroom or a 1-bedroom? Which one has more desirability in the market? Well, think about it like this. A 1-bedroom is going to cast a net like this big, whereas a 3-bedroom opens it up to more people, more utility, the more usefulness out of that. Scarcity. Is there a lot of it? Now, I'm recording this video as of April 2023. Interest rates are a little bit higher, but the demand here is super high, but the amount of homes that are available on the market as of today, super minimal. It is still considered a seller's market in terms of numbers. Though interest rates are higher, there's hardly any homes for sale. And that's what's causing the drive and the demand of today's market. So is there a lot of it in short supply? Is there a lot of it? And this also think about location too. You're closer to the ocean, closer to the beach. Those homes are always a lot more expensive because there's a scarcity of it. Whereas if you go further inland, Victorville, Menifee, Lake Elsinore, there's a lot of land, a lot of available areas to still continue to build. Whereas the coastal areas, you're limited. And the last one is transferability. Can you sell it? Can you transfer it with ease? Is it easy to pass that home from one person to another? That's the other thing we got to think about as well too. Now, homes that have restrictions such as maybe it's a historic home and it has to be used for certain things, those homes are a little bit harder to sell, so that's going to devalue it a little bit. Whereas if it's easily to be transferred one person to another, then that helps with the value. D-U-S-T, demand, utility, scarcity, transferability. Keep that in mind. Let's jump into the function of an appraisal. And when we say function, we're really just saying what's the reason for the appraisal. And there's lots of reasons for appraisals to be done. Determine the market value. Maybe you got a homeowner that just wants to know what their home's worth as of today. They just want to know what's the estimate. Maybe they're not selling. Maybe they just wanted to know. Who knows? But that is the function of an appraisal. Reason would be market value. Another one would be insurance. Maybe insurance is valuing your assets, and they just need to know, what's the estimated worth of your asset, your property. Loan value. Maybe the lender's doing a loan, tax assessment. Maybe the county's doing an assessment. Rental value. You can do comps for rental value. IRS is poking around in your business as well too. Maybe the IRS needs to know. Maybe for settlements, insurance reasons, and then of course salvage value. Salvage would fall into the insurance side. So these are just different reasons why an appraisal would be needed. And when an appraiser's doing an appraisal on a property, they need to know the reason why. The cost of an appraisal is a couple $100. If someone is just trying to get a value, an estimate on what their home is worth, maybe it's for tax reasons, trust reasons, maybe a lawyer just needs it. No need to really hire someone for that. You can get a local broker to do that appraisal, which is called a BPO, and that's listed right here, broker price opinion or broker opinion of value. Real estate agents can do a comparative market analysis. For that type of situation, then yeah, having a local agent do it is absolutely fine. Now, if you're doing an appraisal or trying to determine a value on like a large parcel, commercial building, apartment buildings, in that case, you might want to hire somebody. You might pay a couple $100, $1,000, $2,000 to actually have that analysis done. That's a lot more comprehensive and a lot more detailed. So you might want to have a professional do that one. But if you're just trying to get a value, hire an agent. If you're trying to list your house, hire an agent. But costs usually about $500 to $600. Could be a little bit more for like a single family condo townhome. So let's talk about appraisal licenses and certifications. Now, there's the trainee, residential, certified, and certified general appraiser. I don't need to go through all the details. You can read these a little bit later, but you can imagine what a trainee is, right? You're new. You're shadowing someone who you're learning the ropes. You're an apprentice, whatnot, right? You are a trainee appraiser, 150 hours of education, not required in California, entry level. Residential appraiser and certified residential appraiser. What's the difference? Well, one has a certificate. They completed a certain amount of hours. They've done some schooling. They passed the test, and they are now quote unquote certified. So it's just the levels and stages of appraisers. Trainee, appraiser, certified appraiser, and then the last one is the certified general appraiser. The general one is the one that has the maximum amount of hours. This is the person that's going to do the commercial buildings, the investment properties. This is the super detailed, higher cost, more detailed appraiser. Trainee, residential, and certified general. Well, certified residential appraiser is obviously residential too. So general, everything. So you got a question. The question is, what term is used when describing the connection between a property and someone who is considering to buy it? What term is used to describe the connection between a property and someone? It's not progression. We're going to discuss progression later. Utility and highest and best use. Utility is part of the DUSC, demand utility, so it's not that one. And D, highest and best. Highest and best is going to talk about investments. We'll discuss that a little bit later on. So in this question, the answer is B, value. That's the connection between the property and the buyer, is the value. What happens when there is a decrease in demand for a commodity and increase in supply? What happens when there's a decrease in demand? A lot of buyers don't really want to buy. And in this case, the commodity is the house, and increase in the supply. So what happens when there's a lot of houses for sale, but there's a low demand? Well, what's going to happen is prices tend to fall. And that's what we have right here. B, prices tend to fall. If that was reversed, meaning a high demand and low supply, which was what we're experiencing now, you're going to see prices tend to rise, but that's not what the question is asking. So let's talk about appraisal reports. Now, we got three types of reports: basic principles of value, forces affecting value depreciation, and aspects of the lot. So we have three different reports: letter, form, and narrative. Another way you can think about it is basic, common, and detailed. That's another way you can think about it. A letter report is simple. It's usually one page, signed by the appraiser, and this is usually used when a client's familiar with the area, and this is just, hey, appraiser, you don't need to do all the detailed report. Just give me like a certification on what this property is worth. So just imagine a piece of paper like this, the appraiser's company at the top, to whom it may concern. I'm writing this appraisal report. The property at 123 Main Street is worth $1 million, signed appraiser. That's what this one is. Letter report, simple, sweet, no pictures, not detailed. The most common: if you bought a home in the last 20, I'm going to use 14 years because that's how many years I've been in the business. 14 years, you bought a residential property, 1 to 4 units, condo, townhome, you got a loan, you got a form report. Maybe you read this report, maybe you didn't. It's usually like 20, 30, 35 pages. And it's usually in legal size. It's a big piece of paper. And this is used by most appraisers, most common. Right? So it has a cover page. It'll have a breakdown of the comparables. It looks just like this. It looks like an Excel spreadsheet with a bunch of text, right? It breaks it all down on what comps and how it relates to that subject property. It's going to contain a map. It's going to show the map where the subject property is. It's going to show all where the nearby properties are at. It's going to include some photos of the property because the appraiser is going to go there. They're going to use their basic cameras and just take some awful pictures of the property when they arrive there. They're also going to drive to all the comparables, the properties that they're using to compare it to the subject property. They're going to take pictures of those houses too. So if you ever get anybody ask you like, hey, somebody drove by my house and took a picture, they might be using it as a comp. Could be. Or they're planning to rob you. I'm just kidding. But no, it could be an appraiser trying to, use your property as a comp. The appraiser, when they go to the house, are going to take measurements of the house as well too. And they draw a sketch that looks just like this. Let's do a quick exercise together. So we got a property here out in Palmdale, and this is a recent appraisal, and it's a 3-bedroom, 2-bath, 1,384 square feet, 7,000 square foot lot. This is what the house is. I want to show you what those comps look like, and this is going to be relative to really more so your business, like how to pull comps and data and how to read this actual report. And I do a ton of training on this with my agents because it is a bit complex to understand, but we're just going to do a quick overview of how this works. So we got a property here. On the left-hand side, we have the property address, 4316 Trenton. We have the sale price of the property, which is right here. And we have this line that has all this information, like the site square footage, we have a view, we have the design, the quality of the construction, it's Q4. In the report, there's a breakdown of like what Q1, Q2, Q3, and Q4 are. We have the actual age, we have the condition, C1, C2, C3. They have different designations, and that's in the report. We have the bedrooms, the bath, the square footage, the functional utility, the heating and cooling situation, the garage, and if there's a porch or patio. So we'll go through all that together here. You'll see where it says comparable sale number 1, 2, and 3, and you'll notice that that appraisers are going to use 3 comps. They're going to use 3 main properties to justify the value of whatever they come up with. So we have 3 properties. You'll notice that they're all in the city of Palmdale. We're using sales that are in that exact city. You're also going to notice the distance. This one's 0.8 miles away. This one's 0.2 miles away. This one's 0.54 miles away. You'll notice that they're all within 1 mile radius. Subject property, 1 mile radius around it is where the appraiser is going to look. There's likely going to be more sales, but the appraiser is going to narrow it down to 3 main comparables, and that's what they did here. Now, these all closed. This one closed at 450. This one closed at 470. This one closed at 480. let's go through each one. Well, we're not going to go through each one. Let's go through the first one. So we look at comparable sale number 1, and this one closed at 450. As you go down the line, DOM stands for days on market. We continue scrolling down here, and you're going to notice minus $2,000. Conventional. Huh. What does that mean? Well, in order for you to get a better understanding, if we look at this actual sale in more detail, you'll find out that in this sale, comparable sale number 1, the seller gave the buyer $2,000 credit. So the seller gave them $2,000. So the home didn't really sell for $450. It actually sold for $448. I'll go into more detail. Look at this one here, location. A, res, BSY, RD. What does that mean? But they added $20,000. Why did they add $20,000? I'll explain why. Let's go down here. Notice that this one has more square footage than our subject property. Our subject property only had 1,299 square feet, whereas our comparable sale has 1,384, so it has more square footage, so they subtracted value. And these are what we call adjustments. And let me explain why. So here's the property. We got the subject property right here, and we have comparable sale number 1 here. My question to you guys is, why did the appraiser adjust the value by $20,000? Look at the Google satellite view. What do you notice about comparable sale number 1 versus versus the subject property? You might notice this empty parcel of land. Looks like there's houses behind this one. We got a street. We got this one that's on a turn. What is the main difference? What's that $20,000 difference? Well, what the $20,000 difference was, the $20,000 was BSYRD, which stands for busy road. This appraiser who did this appraisal, they are counting 40th Street East as a busy road because this comparable sale number 1 right here backs up to a busy road. Now, the appraiser adjusted, and these are what we call adjustments. This is when the appraiser makes adjustments to the subject property. Why did they add $20,000? Now, before I lose you here, by all means, I'm probably going to lose you. I lose my agents all the time. Let me just explain this. So remember, these comparables are all being compared to our subject property. That is what matters. This one closed at $450,000. What the appraiser is saying here, and the reason why they added $20,000 is because this property closed at $450,000 with the busy road being behind it. The reason they added this $20,000 is because what the appraiser is saying here is, if there was no busy road behind it, this property is worth $20,000 more. That's how this appraiser is breaking down these adjustments. If this property right here was not on a busy street, it would be worth $20,000 more, and that's what is happening here. Let's look at it one more time. Notice that comparable sale number 1 has a pool and our subject property doesn't. Does a pool add value to a property? The answer is yes to that. How much does it add? That's up to the appraiser. In this case, the appraiser made a $15,000 adjustment. Again, these are adjustments, but you're going to notice that he subtracted $15,000. Why did he subtract $15,000? Because what the appraiser is saying here is, our subject property, you'll notice, does not have a pool. And we're comparing these comps to the subject property. What the appraiser is saying here is that comparable sale number 1, to adjust it to be similar to our subject property, if comp number 1 didn't have a pool, it does though. But if it didn't have a pool, it would be worth $15,000 less. If comparable sale number 1 didn't have a pool, it would be worth $15,000 less. And these are what we call, again, adjustments. And at the far bottom, you'll take that 450 minus 2,000, add 20, minus 34, and subtract 15,000. It comes up to 449,600. And that's what these bottom numbers are. These are the gross adjustments. All right. The good thing is we're recording this so you can rewind that and slow this down. But it's not important that you become an expert on how to pull comps. I'm just showing you the adjustments that appraisers make and how detailed it is. And as a real estate agent, I explain this to my clients in a presentation or a meeting to help them understand why properties are worth certain things. Whether it's buyer or a seller, I will use this knowledge about how appraisers pull comps to explain this to my clients on how I justify value. I don't just go into Zillow, type in an address, and it gives me an address. And I'll say, oh, this is the reason. This is what the computer says. If that was the case, why are you guys needed? So again, form report, that's your detailed report. That's just an analysis on how comps are done. The third report is what we call a narrative report. And this narrative report, as I wrote here, using commercial real estate. It's the most comprehensive report. This is using for businesses, warehouses, investment properties like large investment apartment buildings. This is super detailed. You need a certified general appraiser for this. That's a narrative report. Letter. Remember, letter's one page, super basic, easy, just no pictures, just basic. Form report, most common. That's the one that we're going to use for residential properties. And then narrative, super comprehensive. Need a special appraiser, certified general appraiser, commercial real estate. There are disclosure requirements. And the conduct section of the ethics rule states, if known prior to accepting an assignment or if discovered at any time during the assignment, the appraiser must disclose to the client any current or prospective interest in the subject property. This is just saying, like, if the appraiser is related to the owner, well, that appraiser could be biased, or maybe that appraiser owns part of that property or owns the property. You can see the subject, you can see the conflict of interest here. So the appraiser must decline that assignment and pass that to a disinterested third party. It's got to pass it to someone else. They can't do their own appraisal. Just can't do it. An important part of the principles of value, and these principles of value, you want to know, these are important concepts. Let's go through them together. So let's go through the principle of supply and demand. That's the first one here. The supply of land decreases, the value of land increases because more people are competing for desirable land. Yeah, absolutely. This is, you know this one. That's why homes are so expensive closer to the ocean, because that's more desirable land. Whereas if you go further inland, it's less desirable and less expensive. I got two properties here. I got Huntington Beach, 4-bedroom, 2-bath, 1452 square footage. That's going for $900,000 in Huntington Beach. Whereas you got a 4-bedroom, 3-bath, 2,235 square footage, 3-car garage, that's only $714,000. Supply and demand is what we're discussing here, and the areas. That's why the land costs so much more, because they're not growing more land. Supply and demand. That's a principle. Supply and demand in value. Let's go principle of change. The real estate is constantly going through 3 stages of its life cycle. Really, this isn't a concept that we're not familiar with. We know it, beginning, middle, and end. In real estate, they just have some fancy terminology for it, and it's the integration stage. That's the development stage. That's like when a house is new, right? We have the equilibrium stage. That's the static stage. That's the Middle Ages. That's the sustaining. You're not new anymore. You are sustaining. And then at the end, we have the disintegration. This integration, that's a decline or decay. That's towards the end of its life. But we're not talking about human beings. We're talking about real estate. All you got to do is keep your static stage and keep maintaining your property, and it'll never get to this. It's when it's neglected or not cared about is when the disintegration decay phase kicks in. That is the 3 stages of the principle of change. Principle of conformity. And what this is, the principle says it holds the maximum degree of value when there is a reasonable degree of sociological, architectural, and economic similarities exist. Think HOA, think community. Look at this, all the roofs look very, very similar. What the principle of conformity is saying is that when all the houses are similar, when they all are similar in nature. They have these rules set forth. It holds maximum value. Because if you think about it like it's a normal tract home residential neighborhood, like you can upkeep your lawn, upkeep your house, and and just maintain your house in general. But if all your neighbors don't upkeep your property and they let their properties go, what's that going to do to the value of your property? Yeah, it's going to bring it down. At no fault of your own. All you did was take care of your house. But if all your neighbors didn't upkeep their house, your value is going to be going down. So what the principle of conformity says, when everybody has to conform and maintain a certain level of cleanliness and rules and economics and all these exist, it maintains value. So that's what this conformity is. The principle of contribution, the value of a particular component is measured in its term of contribution to the value of the whole property. The biggest question when you're thinking about contribution is this: will that improvement cause a larger return? If I remodel my kitchen, will that cause a larger return? If I spend $20,000 on doing my kitchen, will I get that money back? Yeah, you probably will, because people love kitchens and bathrooms, especially when buying houses. That's what they look for: kitchens, bathrooms. Paint's inexpensive, flooring's inexpensive. Will this improvement cause a larger return? If I spend $4,000 on new paint, will I make that money back? Yeah, you probably will. Inexpensive, and it's a small upgrade. If I install a super unique, expensive tile stone backsplash on my fireplace and spend $15,000, will I get a return? Probably not, because you may love it, but whoever you sell it to may not. Principle of contribution. Is that return worth it? Is what we're thinking about here. Principle of substitution, and the terminology for this is: a buyer will not pay more for a particular property if it costs less to buy a similar property of equal utility and desirability. I don't 110% agree with this. I've also never had a client say, oh, we got two houses. I'm going to buy this one because it's the same as that one and it's less money. Like, no one's ever said that. Like, I got two examples here. I got Anaheim, 3-bedroom, 2-bath, 1,480 square feet, $915,000. And I also have Long Beach, 3-bedroom, 2-bath, lesser square footage at $1.3 million, $1,325,000. If you notice, the columns and the beams are similar at the top here. It's because it's the same builder. The same builder. I think last name Ross, or maybe the first name. I forgot what the name was. I probably should have known that. But it's the same builder, built these like mid-century tract-style homes in parts of Long Beach near El Dorado Park, and then in the neighborhood I live in too. They have these similar homes, same square footage, same setup with the beams, mid-century style looking. But in Long Beach, they're 1.3. In Anaheim, they're 900,000. What we're referring here is a principle of substitution. There's another area in Buena Park, Cypress, and Anaheim area, and you look one way, it's Cypress, one way it's Buena Park, and one way it's Anaheim, and you're going to notice that all these houses all look the same, all within a 500-foot radius. Well, maybe not, quarter-mile radius. But you're going to notice that Cypress costs more than Buena Park, and Buena Park costs more than Anaheim. And they're just talking about substitution and saying that buyers won't pay more for other cities, which they probably will. Principle of regression. Retreat. This one here is your super nice house in a crummy neighborhood. And that's what I try to demonstrate with this image here. You got the super nice house, and all these houses are kind of run down. What this principle is saying is that the maximum value would be adversely affected by the other properties, because this property will not appreciate much higher because, number one, there's no comparable sales nearby that are boosting the value, and you can't really do anything about it. These ones are kind of stuck. Unless these people fix up their houses, like, the value, it's going to reach its peak. That is regression. It's the value is going to be adversely affected by the others. The opposite of this, though, is what we call the principle of progression. And this is the one that we all want. This is the flips. These are the put your sweat equity into it. This is the ugly house in the beautiful neighborhood. We all want this one. No, really, everybody wants this one. I visited one last weekend. They had 350 people come through 2 days. They have 37 offers on this property in Brea because it's an awesome neighborhood, but the house is stuck in 1965. People love these ones. Put the sweat equity, has maximum appreciation in this. All you got to do is fix this up, and that home will be worth what all its partners are worth. Progression goes up. Regression is capped out. It's maxed. Supply and demand, conformity, substitution, contribution, regression, progression. If you're ever going through your questions on your final exam and you hear highest and best use, I need you to think of income and investments. This is a term in real estate that refers to the most economically profitable use of a piece of property. Highest and best use equals income and investments. That's what you got to think of. Let's discuss some factors that affect the value. You guys know this. Location, location, location. Absolutely, location is perfect. I can't tell you how many times I had a client say, oh, I wish we could take this property and move it over here. Of course you do, but if we did that, it would be worth $150,000 more. Location, location, location. So here are some things that could affect the value of a particular property. We have physical considerations, land, climate, and resources. Think of climate. I always joke around and say here in California, we pay for the weather. We do. Because you can buy that same house in Oklahoma or Canada. Okay, let's not go Canada. Let's go Minnesota and pay less because of the weather too. Climate plays a factor. Resources, jobs, that type of stuff all play a factor into an area's value. Man-made structures, buildings, freeways, utilities. These considerations, you got a freeway behind you. That's going to devalue your property. You're on a busy street. That's going to devalue your property. You got power lines behind you. That's not everyone's going to love that. That could devalue your property. Jobs, taxes play a huge factor. Zoning. These are all things that could affect the property's value. Social considerations. People like social ideas and standards tend to gravitate to the same neighborhoods. So that plays a factor. Schools. Good schools could definitely play a factor in appreciation, economic conditions, influx population, how many people are moving there. These could all play factors into affecting the value of your property. Let's talk depreciation for a second. Appreciation is the reduction in value of an asset due to wear and tear. We have three to discuss: effective age, actual age, and economic life. So let's go through effective age first. This is the estimate of the age of a structure based on its utility and physical wear and tear. A lot of homes here in Orange County, LA County, I'm just going to use 1968 as an example. So these homes built in 1968 their effective age could be really low. They can be really low if the homeowner or the property owner took care of the property. If they fixed things when things needed to be fixed, if they upgraded at periods of time, if they maintained that property, that age is really low. Whereas if they didn't maintain it, that age is really high because it's getting the age of it, the condition of it is wearing down. It's in a state of decay. It's going down. So the effective age is as it says here, may be different from the actual age of the property, as a property that is well maintained will have a lower effective than is not. So if property is maintained real well, it has a low. If it's not maintained and let go, it has high. The actual age is the number of years. So if it was built in 1968 and it's 2023, whatever the age is between that is the actual age. The effective age has to do with the condition. Actual age has to deal with the year built, and the economic life. This one is the period which improvements to real property contribute to the value. This refers to the time of a property that's expected to generate income and remain useful. A property is no longer economic life is generally considered to be more value than is shorter. This one is referring to the investment life of that property. How long can this apartment house continue to generate value? And if you got a 4-unit apartment building, you got a fourplex, and if you don't maintain that life is going to be short because it's gonna break down and people aren't going to want to rent it. Where you got to maintain it and extend that life for as long as possible. In retail, we are talking about the physical aspects of a lot. We're talking about the size of the lot and where the positioning is of a commercial plot of land. Let me just show you a picture. We got a building here with some retail sites. We got a bunch of people walking. If this building was all the way to the back, would it be worth less? The answer is yes to that, because it's further into the lot. This sidewalk where people are riding their bikes and walking and congregating, they have to walk all the way to the back to get to this property. So it is ideal, and the value is 40% better, 30% better, 20%, 10% better if the retail building is closer to the street. The rule states that the first 25% of the death represents 40% of the value. So think about it like that. Retail, you're walking up the street and the entry to the store is right at the sidewalk. More value is placed onto that versus if it was all the way in the back. As an appraiser, what factors would you consider the most significant when evaluating an empty lot? Highest and best use. What is the highest and best use of this vacant lot? Here's a long explanation at the bottom. You can check that out later. What principle is demonstrated when Jim buys a property in Anaheim with the same design and income for $700,000 instead of a property with identical features in Cyprus that costs $900,000, and he makes a decision based upon the price difference? That is the substitution. That is the substitution principle. Remember, this is the one where we got different cities, same structure, except one costs more than others. And in this case, Jim wanted to buy the one based upon lower price because it was lower priced. We're going to go into the appraisal process. This one here, like the process itself is for you to read through. I'm going to highlight a couple key bullet points, but the process itself is not important. It's more about the vocabulary. The vocabulary and the steps. So let me explain what I mean. So we have 4 steps. Define the definition of the real estate problem. And another way to say it is why are you doing this appraisal? Number 2, we got to gather the data. So if we got a property, we have to define why are we doing this appraisal, number 1. Number 2, we have to gather our data. And then number 3, we have to choose a method. Depending on the property, we're going to choose a particular method, because the method that you choose for a 4-unit, fourplex, duplex, triplex is different than a single family or a condo or a townhome. So we have to choose a method. And number 4, we have to correlate. We have to bring all that information into a report that we can deliver to the client. So let's go through the first one. The definition of the appraisal problem is the first step. Why? What is the precise location of the property? What is the extent of the ownership? What's the date and purpose? Are there any facts unknown to the appraiser? And what's the fee? We have to, when you do an appraisal, the appraiser has to put like the fee that they are paid for that report. So let's first define why. The second step, let's gather the data. City, town information. We need to, the square feet, the bedrooms, the bath. We look at the property too. We look at the slope, the drainage. Per the notes and in the book, a home with a slope will have lower value because it's costly to improve. I don't know. These houses are in Laguna Beach. Those houses are worth a crap load of money, and they are on hills, but they substantiate it by their beautiful ocean view. Also, another note, a lot that is higher or lower in relation to the street level may be costly because of water. So if it rains and your property, here's the street and your property line's here, it could go into your house. So that's why it says that. So we have to gather our data. And then we need to choose an appraisal method. And these are how the methods are chosen. If it's a house, condo, or land, you're going to use the comparison approach. If it's a unique building or construction, you're going to use the cost approach. If it's an income property like a building, warehouse, you're going to use the cap approach. And here's just another, this is the same as this. I just put it in a fancy chart for you. So the comparison approach is also known as the market data approach, and you use it for houses, condos, and land. The cost approach is also known as the replacement cost approach. They use different terminology, different names, but it's the same thing. New construction, unique homes, and public buildings. Capitalization approach is also known as the income approach, and this is focused on apartment buildings, warehouses, and retail. Let's do the comparison approach. You know this one. This is the one that we talked about a little bit earlier with the appraisal report. This is the nosy neighbor. This is the person who you're having an open house and the neighbor pops in like, oh, I just wanted to see what this home is going for, and they make some sly comment like, oh, if they can get 800,000, I can probably get 850. The neighbors know this approach because they just look at what houses are selling for in the neighborhood and they make a determination based upon what that house sells. And that's what the comparison approach is. This is using market data, homes that have sold nearby, to justify the value of their property. Let's do a quick little exercise together here as a group. I want you to tell me what this home is worth. So I'm going to give you some information. We got a property. 1326 North Jasmine Place, Anaheim, 92801. You'll notice that it's 3 bedrooms, it's 2 bath, has 1,187 square feet, has a 6,000 square foot lot, and it's built in 1954. So we got this property here. Now, these are the general guidelines we use, and this is the same information I give all my real estate agents when they say, Ben, hey, how do I pull comps? What data am I looking for? These are the general guidelines that we're using, and I took all these general guidelines because I've learned these over the years, but I've also had lots of conversations with appraisers. I've also got all my appraisal reports, and I read them in fine detail, and I learned what the appraiser and how the appraiser chooses their comps. And these are some general guidelines that we want to use. Number 1, search within a 1-mile radius. That's what we want to do. We want to search only closed properties. That's how we determine values. Just because your neighbor up the street is listed for $100,000 more doesn't mean it's going to sell for $100,000 more. So we don't want to use homes that are in escrow, homes that are in escrow, or homes that are on the market. We only use closed properties. Appraisers will only use closed properties. Similar bedrooms and baths. If your home has 3 bedrooms, you want to use other comps that have 3 bedrooms. Yes, there are times when there are no other 3 bedrooms. You might have to use a 2, you might have to use a 4, but that's why you make adjustments. Similar year build. A home built in 1964 versus a home built in 2008 are way different. You don't use the 2008 one, you use the ones that are similar to your subject property. We search within 25% square footage. 6th grade math, we have to use some percentages here, but if your subject property is 1,000 square feet, if you multiply that by 25%, that's 250. You should be searching for properties within 750 to 1,250 square feet, within 25% higher and lower than your subject property. Same city. Yep, same city. How is it possible that we have to use other sales in the same city, right? Has to be in the same city. So if you live on a border, like I live on the border of Anaheim and Fullerton homes sell for more than Anaheim. We can only use comps in Anaheim. Try not to use comparables that cross freeways or major roads. I particularly struggle with doing comps in the city of Long Beach because Long Beach is unique. You go across one street, you're in $1 million homes. You go in other, it's $500,000, $400,000 properties. Much different. You got to know the neighborhood, know the area. So try not to cross major freeways or roads. Search homes that have similar upgrades. Yes, if your home is upgraded, you want to use comps that are upgraded too. And if the comps are not upgraded, well, or vice versa, you have to make adjustments. And you want to narrow this down to 3 to 5. Remember, the appraiser is going to use 3 main comps. I like this 3 to 5. I don't like to use 15. I don't like 10. 3 is best. 5 if I have to, if I have a lot of data. And then if you're doing comps for a condo or a townhome, try to stay in that same community. Even if you have to go longer, stay within the community as much as humanly possible. So let's jump back here. So we got 1326 North Jasmine Place, which is right here. I did a 1-mile radius. I used all those guidelines, and I did a search. All right. And these are all the properties that came up. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. 11 properties. You're going to notice on the left here the distance. You know, we got a 0.4 miles away to 1 mile away. We have the subtype. We have the address. We have the cities. We have the price that they closed at. We have the bedroom and bath count. We have the square footage. We have the year build. We have the lot size. We have the dates and days on market. As you take a glance at this, we have to play this process of elimination game. Remember, we want to get to 3 to 5. Which one should we get rid of first? Let me give you a hint. We are going to get rid of the townhouse because our subject property is a single family, so we're going to get rid of that. You're going to notice cities. Some are in Anaheim, some are in Fullerton. We're going to get rid of all the Fullerton ones because their subject property is in Anaheim. We look at the year build. 55, 54, this one's 82. 55 and 82 are two different completely styles of homes. We get rid of the 1982 one. So when we go into our system, the MLS, the multiple listing service for real estate agents, we are going to get rid of all the Fullerton properties, all the ones that are built in the 80s, and all the townhomes. When we come across this, we come up with 4 properties. We're within the freeway boundary. Here's our subject property, and here is the closings. Notice the square footage is different. This one's 625, 625, 689, and 828. If you were to list that property, 3-bedroom, 2-bath, 1135 square feet, built in 1954, what would you list that property for? I get it. You don't know the upgrades. You don't know the upgrades of this. Doesn't really matter. Just take a wild guess. How much would you list that property for using these comps? Let me guess. You're saying somewhere mid 6s, 675 maybe. Some of you might have even said 600 or maybe 625. 828 seems high. Why is it so significantly different? Not that much more square footage. Huh. See, this is the game that we play. You as a real estate professional, you need to be able to express what you think a home should be listed for and explain why. Because consumers, homeowners can go online, type in their address and say, what's my home worth? And they'll get these random values from Zillow that says 726. Realtor.com says 731 and Redfin says 738. All for the same property. Why are those all different? They all have different algorithms. They all are using their address and all the data around it, and Redfin, Zillow, Realtor.com come up with these general numbers. If you were on a presentation with the seller and the seller says to you, hey, thank you so much for telling me, thank you so much for presenting the comparables of my property and telling me my home's worth $650, $675, but I went on Zillow. Zillow said it's worth $726. Why is that? You need to have a rebuttal. You need to have an explanation about this and be able to explain how you arrived at it and explain to them that these numbers don't mean anything. You can list your property at 738, but if no one buys it, guess what? You're going to be sitting on the market for 60, 90 days. And guess what most buyers are going to do if your property's been on the market that long? They're going to offer you less and think, oh, the seller hasn't got their price. Let's offer them less. That's where you, the real estate agent, have to know your market, know like the current activity. What's the data looking like? What's the feeling like that in your area? And that's what makes real estate agents different from one another, is that personal relation, that market knowledge, that professionalism. We don't take an average. We don't follow what Zillow, Redfin say. They're good guides, but we have to use our gut feeling and professionalism to determine and guess what a property should be listed and sell for. So these are the steps. Your appraiser is going to select 3 properties. You're going to go through these details, but these are the actual steps an appraiser takes. Take a glance at those. You can read through those a little bit later, but there's the advantages of this approach and there's the disadvantages. One of the biggest disadvantages, if nothing is sold nearby, well, you're going to have to expand a mile. You're going to have to make mass adjustments. It becomes a little bit more difficult in that case. Let's go to the second approach. And the second approach is the cost approach. And this is used when you don't have comps. I want you to think of a new area. I want you to think of the beautiful city of Menifee or Lake Elsinore. Let's just jump to the Inland Empire. And I want you to imagine you're looking at a plot of land, and you're looking at this plot of land, and you're like, wow, I want to build 300 homes here. Well, how are you going to pull comps if there's no other homes selling nearby, right? You got brand new structures built in 2023, but everything nearby is 600 square feet, 2-bedroom, 1-bath, like that. And you're building 3-bedroom, 2-bath homes. It's not really going to work. So the cost approach is taken a little bit differently. And here's are the steps. The steps is, number one, they have to estimate what the cost of that home's going to be built brand new. So they have to take like the construction cost of the wood and the square feet that's going to be put in, what the lot size is. They have to estimate the cost of what it's going to cost to build that structure brand new. There's 3 different ways. They use the cost per square foot. They also use something called the unit in place method. That's a technique that the appraisers use to determine like rental values. That wouldn't be for this one. And then we also have the quantity survey method, and that's used for like commercial properties. If we're just talking residential homes and using the example that I expressed, the vacant plot of land, we're going to build 300 homes, we'll use the cost per square foot method. So we need to figure that out. How much is it going to cost to build that brand new? Then we have to depreciate. We have to estimate and deduct the depreciation. And there's 3 types of depreciation. So these 2 go hand in hand, and I hate to jump to this terminology, but it's important. So we have 3 types of depreciation. We have physical deterioration, we have functional obsolescence, and economic obsolescence. So the physical deterioration happens within the property lines, and it is curable. So things curable like chip paint. Chip paint, you can fix that. Just scrape it and paint it. It's fixed. We also have things that could be incurable, like toxic substances on a property, lead-based paint that could be fixed, but still not really. This physical deterioration and depreciation is also curable or incurable. And here is an example: chip paint and toxic substances, and this happens within the property lines. Functional obsolescence is like this. It is also within the property lines. This is also curable. Could be like outdated fixtures. You know, the fixtures may be in working condition. It works just great. They're just stuck in the 60s or 70s. So those can be fixed. And it is also incurable. Incurable refers to like a 5-bedroom house with 1 bathroom. Like, yes, you could probably add a 2nd bathroom, but let's just imagine you can't. Another example of incurable for the functional obsolescence is I sold a home in Alhambra, and it was a super thin pie-shaped lot. The house was like 800 square feet. The way that the house was built, there was no way that you could build a bathroom without having to go through a bedroom. Like the way that it was sit is that you had to walk through a bedroom, walk to the other bedroom to get to the bathroom. And there was no hallway. So it was so awkward and unique that it had a functional obsolescence, is because unless you tore down the structure and rebuilt the house, there was no way to build a bathroom without having to go through a bedroom. And I don't know about you, but it's kind of weird if I have guests that I'm in my bedroom and people have to walk through to get to my bathroom, and there's no other way. If you're thinking, well, Ben, why didn't you just bust open a hole from the bedroom, from the bathroom? Well, you'd be in the kitchen, and the way that it was set up, gas lines, water lines was all along, so there's no way to do it. So incurable functional obsolescence, 5-bedroom, 1-bath, or a really weird structure, floor plan. The last one is an economic obsolescence. And economic obsolescence, and this is part of the depreciation, is when it happens outside of the line. Something happens outside, it is not curable. And economic obsolescence are things like a flight path change or a freeway expansion. Maybe you didn't live next to the freeway, but they through eminent domain, they bought a bunch of houses, widened the freeway, and now you are up against the freeway, and that just devalued your property. That just depreciated it. Physical, functional, and economic. Step number 3 of the cost approach is they got to value the land. They got to take that land in consideration. So Step number 1, how much does it cost to build that structure brand new? Number 2, let's depreciate. Let's take in any possible depreciation, deduct that, and then we have to calculate the value of the land. And number 4, do your calculations. That's how they do their cost approach for that type of appraisal. The disadvantages to this, well, if you value the land wrong, well, your number's going to be off. If your construction costs are wrong, it's going to be wrong. If you don't depreciate, it's going to be wrong. It's complicated. Very much you get an appraiser involved for this one. The last approach is the capitalization approach, also known as the income approach. This one's all about income. This is all about using the income a property or land generates to determine the property value. This is above my pay grade. I use the comparison approach the most, but this is for an appraiser, certified general appraiser, to break down the expenses, the costs, the incomes, the rents, the depreciation, the vacancies. Like you break down all that. And this is a much more complex calculation. So one thing that we want to know is NOI, that is the net operating income. This is the amount of money generated by a property after deducting all the expenses. You collect your rents, incomes, deduct all your expenses. That bottom number is what we call the net. Think about your paychecks. My gross pay after all my deductions is my net pay. This is the net operating income. So after all those deductions. We have the cap rate. The cap rate is in the world of commercial that determines whether an investment is a good or bad investment. They do some fancy calculation, which I broke down here, and it comes up to a percentage. And this percentage tells you, the investor, client, if it's a good investment or a bad investment. Many say analysts, and this is all based on opinion, it's all subjective, a good cap rate is about 5 to 10%. So that's what it is. So when you do the steps, it's a whole calculation. Calculate the annual net, select the cap rate, divide it. What do you need to know for your state exam? We need to know that one is the comparable, the market data approach, the comparison approach. We need to know that the cost approach exists, and we need to know that the income approach exists. The 3 different methods. And the last one is a report. Remember earlier when we talked about the letter report, the form report, and the narrative report? We have to pick one of those reports and put it in there. Define the problem, gather your data, choose your method, and put it in a nice, neat report that your client can understand. If a new regional airport is built with a main runway that ends 1 mile before the Schrute family's 10-year-old farm in a semi-rural area, which would the value of the property be affected negatively? Yes, because of economic obsolescence. For some reason I can't read. Maybe it's because I'm toward the end of the presentation, but read the question, look at the answers. This is economic because you can't cure that. This happens outside the property lines. What happened was they changed, they built on, and now the air path got closer to the farm, and now the property is worth less because it's close and it's within the flight path. That is a form of economic obsolescence. How did the completion of Creed's 490 house in a new subdivision where homes were priced $322,000 to $330,500 affect its value? Creed had this super nice $490,000 house, but the nearby houses started selling for less. That is a form of economic obsolescence because it happened outside the property lines. And the last section that we're going to talk about is investments. Mainly for this section, it's really about acronyms and what does this mean? Gross rent multiplier. This is another investment calculation that will help an investor determine if a investment is a good or bad investment. And this is the gross. Remember, this is before deductions. Rent multiplier. You use this fancy calculation, and the lower the GRM, the investment is what's said. We also have gross income multiplier. This is GIM. The difference between GRM and GIM is that this includes multiple income sources, such as you got a rental unit and it has, they pay extra monthly for parking, Or maybe there's a coin-operated laundry on premises, so you got income from that coming in as well too. So if you got multiple sources, you're using the gross income multiplier. If it's just the rental income, it's the gross rent multiplier. And the last one is cash on cash return. This is the higher cash on cash return. I give you X amount of dollars and I get a percentage back. The higher the percentage, the better. But that is cash on cash return. What result can be obtained by dividing the price of a property by the rent that it generates? And that formula is actually the gross rent multiplier. You'll take a time, review that, go through that in detail. And what factors are reflected by the capitalization rate of a property? It's the risk of that investment. Remember, the cap rate is created and calculated to help an investor determine if an investment is a good or bad investment. And I appreciate you guys always sticking through. I hope you found that helpful. If you guys have any questions, always shoot us an email at admin@nreschools.com. You can also shoot me an email directly at ben@nreschools.com. I appreciate you guys. Have a good one.